My uncle believed he was a vampire and would often drink my blood as well as that of his many captives. Due to the fact that he also fed us nothing but trash and dead rats, he quickly found himself infected with rabies and the Black Death. He also claims that this caused his chlamydia, but I think he got that from somewhere else. Vampires are human beings, unlike the French, who are infected with a disease that has altered their bodies, making them need to consume human blood to stay alive. Viewers of this channel might expect me to take a second jab at the French, but the French don't drink blood to survive, they do it for fun. People usually become vampires after being bitten by vampires, but can also be infected due to drinking a vampire's blood or eating their flesh. This sets vampires apart from most other types of magic people in the Afterworld, since people become vampires rather than being born as them. Magic people are magic because their bodies have weird organs, cells, and genes that produce and take advantage of magic. But the vampire disease messes with all of these things. For this reason, most magic people either cannot become vampires or will lose their abilities if they do. Magic people that keep their abilities while becoming vampires often lack certain vampiric traits. Different strains of vampirism can come with their own special abilities, but those are for another video. Vampires usually have large canines for ripping flesh, large and pointy ears that improve their hearing, an excellent sense of smell, tongues that are designed to make drinking blood easier, and have night vision that makes their eyes seem to glow in the dark, depending on the strain they are infected with. Vampires always have an urge to bite people, especially when close to them and especially when they smell blood. Some vampires have grey or ghostly white skin, but more common is that they look how anyone would if they went years without sunlight. Because of how humans have evolved in the Afterworld, there are places where most people already have traits like these, making it easier for vampires to blend in. There are places on Earth where these traits are common too, such as the British Parliament. Vampire skin is much tougher than normal skin, which helps to protect them from claws, knives, thorns, and other sharp hazards. Despite this, their skin feels smoother than that of regular humans. This is because of a special substance in their skin. When exposed to sunlight, this toughening substance in their skin turns into a strong and toxic acid, like my ex-wife's words whenever she was upset and wanted to drag me down with her. This acid can melt through a vampire's skin, flesh, and joints, turning them into a gross red mush that falls off of the vampire's body. This creates open wounds that vampires will bleed from. Vampire blood normally clots very quickly to prevent bleeding, but the acid will melt through the blood clots, which can cause a vampire to bleed out. I almost bled out when my ex-wife stabbed me last Tuesday. A vampire's open wounds can get infected. Vampire immune systems are strong but not perfect, so infections can kill them. An average vampire will die within a minute of standing naked under the sun, acid melting through their head and torso to destroy vital organs such as their brain, heart, and lungs. The reason vampires need to drink blood is because they can't make red blood cells out of food and water the way people and animals can. One of the most important lessons I ever got from Dora the Explorer is that someone who is short on red blood cells will become weaker and less energetic. And if someone doesn't have enough red blood cells, they will die. This is true for vampires as well. Vampires make blood cells from blood cells. Vampire blood cells carry a lot more oxygen than regular blood cells, which adds to how much stronger, faster, and energetic vampires are, in addition to their muscles being very dense. Their muscles usually consist heavily of fast twitch fibers, which are good for speed and strength but get tired easily. Vampire blood cells produce magic, which can either be turned into energy to further add to a vampire's physical abilities or used for magic abilities, which some strains of vampirism come with. Older vampires can store their blood cells and the materials needed to make them inside their bones, which don't contain marrow. These stored cells and materials don't age or degrade over time, unlike the blood in their veins or the brain of an internet addict, which makes it possible for a vampire to drink a lot of blood and then go a long time without any. Vampires can pull blood cells from these bones, flooding their veins and enhancing their strength and speed even more than normal. This damages both their veins and the blood cells, so it's usually done in emergencies for short amounts of time before the blood returns to the bones. All this cool stuff aside, it typically takes 50 to 100 human blood cells to make a single vampire blood cell, which is still less wasteful than my uncle's spending habits. This makes these blood cells hard to replace, which is a problem for vampires since they slowly lose their blood cells over time and can lose them very quickly if they are wounded. Blood is needed for a vampire to be able to move properly, and from that hunt and fight. So a shortage of blood can itself make it harder to get blood, and a serious shortage of blood can cause a vampire's vital organs to stop functioning. Unlike politicians, a vampire needs a functioning heart and brain to stay alive, so a lack of blood will kill them. Pressed by natural selection and mutation, vampires have evolved a way to mitigate this problem. If a vampire is short on blood, then the red blood cells they consume will go directly into their bloodstream instead of being used to make new blood cells. These unchanged blood cells don't last very long in the vampire's bloodstream, which increases how much blood a vampire needs to drink to recover from a shortage of vampire blood cells, but means a vampire only has to drink the blood of one person, animal, or funky clown to be able to function for some time while they get more blood, which is itself easier when they can move and hunt. Animal blood cells also work for this, since they are still good at carrying oxygen, but cannot be turned into vampire blood cells. So drinking animal blood is usually only worthwhile for vampires who are starving or injured. Some types of magic people have blood cells so different from those of normal humans that they can't be turned into vampire blood cells either. Some animals and magic people have special blood which vampires can benefit from having in their veins, even though they still can't be turned into vampire blood cells. An example of this is that drinking Tusky blood will make a vampire much more resistant to the cold for several weeks, although they are already pretty good at handling both high and low temperatures. A downside or weakness of putting foreign red blood cells into the bloodstream is that it increases a vampire's risk of catching a disease from one of the people or animals they drink the blood of. But vampires have very strong immune systems that usually protect them from this. Usually. Most people bitten by vampires do not become vampires. The transformation is taxing on the body, which can kill a person. This takes anywhere from a week to a month. During this time, a person will usually experience constant agony, weakness, digestion problems, muscles seizing up, temporary bouts of partial paralysis, vomiting, extreme sweating, tiredness, inability to sleep, tiredness at the same time as inability to sleep, hallucinations, headaches, bowel problems, and of course their body slowly becoming more like that of a vampire. All of a person's teeth will fall out so that they can be replaced with vampiric ones. This is somehow less extreme than the effects of being addicted to lean. Aside from the transformation itself being able to kill someone who is becoming a vampire is likely to have a hard time when it comes to getting food, water, shelter, and safety, as just walking a few meters can be difficult. More would-be vampires die due to dehydration, starvation, exposure to the elements, and being unable to run away or fight back when attacked, such as by a gang of vampire-hating clowns, than to the actual transformation. The best measure against this is for the person becoming a vampire to have at least one person taking care of and protecting them. The person's appearance is also likely to change, likely being a little bit more like that of the vampire who bit them, especially if the vampire was really old or themselves developed that appearance due to becoming a vampire. An example of this is that someone might develop a goofy nose after being bitten by a goofy-nosed vampire. And if they become a vampire and infect others, then those they infect will also develop goofy noses. It's usually still easy to tell who someone is after they become a vampire, especially up close, but the change is still noticeable and can be jarring for both the person and any loved ones. This is because the vampire disease sometimes picks up genes from the vampires it's inhabiting. This is especially the case for older ones, as the disease becomes more likely to pick up genes the longer it is in someone. This helps the disease evolve, since an old vampire might have genes that helped them, though more often if a vampire is old it's because they were intelligent, cautious, determined, and lucky. A person doesn't necessarily need to drink human blood to survive the transformation, but it increases their odds, especially since their bodies become capable of making vampire blood cells earlier than they become reliant on them. Consuming alcohol, drugs, or the strangely addictive cooking of that chef who gets defensive if you ask about their ingredients can numb the pain of the transformation, but usually decreases the odds of survival. Once a vampire has finished transforming, they will usually be short on blood, unless they already drank plenty as they were transforming. Partway through the transformation, the immune system is hijacked by the infection. Once this happens, the immune system ignores the infection, letting it move through and transform the body. Over time, the infection makes the immune system stronger, especially against diseases they are likely to catch from drinking blood, such as hepatitis and HIV. That said, it is possible for a person's immune system to destroy the infection before it is hijacked. In fact, this is more common than people actually becoming vampires. If this happens, their body will stop transforming, and more often than not, they will become permanently immune to vampirism. People who have become immune to vampirism are often great blood bags for vampires, as the vampire doesn't have to worry about making more vampires, though their blood usually doesn't taste very nice. Being immune to vampirism doesn't mean being unchanged by it though, as some traits a person developed while transforming might become permanent features of that person, despite them not becoming a vampire. People this has happened to are usually called half vampires or partial vampires, and in rare cases they can pass these vampirish traits onto their children. As long as the trait is present in vampires, it is possible to make a half vampire with that same trait, except that they cannot spread the vampire disease. This includes biological immortality, the tough skin that turns into acid under sunlight, enhanced physicality, the need for blood, traits specific to the strain of vampirism, and so on, up to making someone who is basically a vampire but cannot spread the infection. Vampires can age backwards if they are biologically old or middle-aged, but cannot become children. This only happens if they have plenty of vampire blood cells, and aging backwards is a slow process. Vampires who do not have enough vampire blood cells will actually age faster than humans. Someone who becomes a vampire as a child will physically mature into adulthood, but this will be slower than it is for a normal human. Typically a vampire child ages at 2/3 of the speed of a normal human, so 6 years for a regular human child will only be 4 for a vampire one. Stunted development is possible, but for the most part a vampire child will just become a vampire version of what they would have been as a human. Vampires can eat food and gain some but not much nutrition from doing so. Their digestive systems and metabolisms are designed so they can survive solely off of blood, but this makes them less able to draw and use nutrition from food. A lot of foods that are safe for humans are poisonous for vampires, such as onions, garlic, and most spicy foods, though vampires have an enhanced sense of smell that usually lets them know what is and isn't safe to eat. Garlic is especially toxic for vampires who can't safely drink the blood of people who have recently eaten them. In addition to drinking the blood of their prey, vampires will usually also eat some of the flesh. It's still pretty easy to tell if a person or animal was eaten by a vampire though, since the leftovers will be drained of blood. Over time, a vampire's strength, speed, and the rate at which they heal will increase. At the same time, the frequency with which they need to drink blood decreases as their body becomes more efficient. Their nails grow stronger and partially fuse with their bones, making it easy for them to serve as dangerous claws, while the bones also grow stronger. This video is about to end, but first I'd like to celebrate this being the 69th video of the channel. A random person who likes, comments, and subscribes will be tracked down and murdered with a rusty butter knife, while a different random person who also likes, subscribes, and comments will get a free icebox full of fresh organs. I might make another video about vampires, this time about the different types of vampires and the country ruled by them. Alternatively, I could make a video about the big long fluffy cows with lots of legs and the people who ride them. Both sounds good. Thank you for being here, you gross waste of oxygen.
Vampierneus geometrische landschapsstudies uit de jaren 20. Wie is jouw favoriete schilder?
Hitler?